Hello, Exuberance. This is Exuberant TV, and this is our series called Inner Improv, where we discuss the inner workings of an improviser. And today I'm talking with Rebecca Stuard, and she's the one of the leaders of Improvolution. How do you call yourself? The CEO, president?
Creative director / owner.
Creative director / owner of a great studio here called Improvolution, which I think your slogan is "Yes and Your Life," right? Yes and life.
Yes and life.
Yeah, which is an amazing slogan, which I totally buy into. And so we're here to talk about not only how does improv work and how does it affect us, the history of improv, but also how it can help the world. We'll see. We're going to talk about it and see what we discover here with Rebecca. Hi.
Hi, Sean.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
This is an honor, and ever since I just came across Improvolution, I said this is a little bit different than your typical, I don't want to say typical improv school because there's no such thing.
No.
But maybe you can just talk a little bit about how you came to be a part of Improvolution, how it arose, and how that fits into your life.
Great. So I started off as a musical theater performer, and I was in a relationship, and his name is Danny, and he asked, let's take an improv class or do a salsa class. And he said, I don't really want to take salsa because you already know how to dance, so let's go take an improv class. And his best friend was Ralph Buckley at the time, and Ralph Buckley is the lotto guy. So you see in front of all the bodegas, this week's lotteries. So Ralph is the first person that ever taught me the term yes and. And in improv, we all know that yes and is the number one rule to improv, that you say yes to anything that's offered you and then you add to it. And so then I got into musical improv. I did a lot of musical improv groups. I got into corporate improv. I worked in corporate, I still, as of today, work a lot in corporate improv. But I started working with like Citibank, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, General Electric, and I would facilitate manager module leadership sessions. And I really, really got interested that they were in a no society, N-O. And they, because you would ask them what you think they did well, and immediately they would go to their deficits. And we're like, we'll get to the improvements in a moment. And so then I did this for about 6 years, and in 2008, the actors got flushed out of big companies like that, because everything got flushed out. And what I started realizing after about 3 years, I started hearing my speech come back to me. I started hearing this yes and speech come back to me. And so I did a little investigative reporting, and the leaders that I was training were now training new management. And I was like, this shit works.
Wow. This
yes and really works. And I truly believe that everyone should improvise. Well, everyone does improvise. We're not scripted in our lives. Yet, some of us are more successful. And I think in the climate that we have right now, politically and socially, I think improv, like, everyone's ready for it. I think globally, we're ready to learn that lesson as a race, as a human race. We're ready to learn yes and implementing that in our everyday lives.
Yes, and I want to ask you this, like, one of the things I've been thinking about is, as kids, they get us into soccer, our parents maybe soccer or music or, a lot of activities, even drama, but improv because it's not just about performing on stage, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit about Viola Smolin's work originally with improv. It wasn't originally meant to be performative necessarily. It was exploratory. And so I'm wondering, like, if improv could have a greater place in school or in growing up societally as an activity. What do you call it? school activity or whatever,
Yeah.
or even in school. I mean, could it be something more in our society?
I truly believe that. I do think that Viola Spolin, I mean, her books say theater games. So I think they are meant to be on stage, though they weren't meant, I mean, I can't be in her mind. They weren't meant in the way they turned out. Like, I think
Right.
Paul Sills, her son, definitely took comedy to, that where it took its comic bend
Right.
was with her son. And I think in its purest form, improv is funny because
Yeah.
it lets you be authentic, it lets you be truthful. And when people recognize themselves in the improv as an audience member, that's where joy comes out, and that's where laughter comes out, is the recognition of, oh, that's me. I understand that. I get that. Yeah.
Well,
I think I lost the question.
No, the truth is funny. I mean, I think that's when the truth comes out in an improv scene, you realize that this is fake. We are making this up as we go along. So as soon as someone says something odd, you're like, wait, you just said that? And then and everyone laughs because it's like, but that's actually life. Like, anyone who decides anything in a split-second decision, a lot of times it's kind of strange. It's just odd.
And I think that's where people don't find the joy
Yeah.
in the quote-unquote mistake. And a good improviser will jump on
Right.
that and light it up. And that's the fun part of improv, is illuminating quote-unquote mistakes. And so people in improv aren't afraid of making mistakes because that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
That's where the discovery is. And I think people in real life, we're often so paralyzed that we don't want to make a mistake, and so therefore we don't move at all. It's a very inertic life in that, instead of kinetic.
That reminds me of my favorite book growing up was called How to Be a Perfect Person in 30 Days or Less. It's a book for kids. And basically,
Really?
Yeah. And my dad told me about it. I think he read it when he was a kid or something. And basically, like, they make you do all these things, like in the book. It's like, okay, now you have to go to school with a stalk of broccoli on a string around your neck. And you got to wear it for a week. And then it starts to smell bad and everything. And then at the end, this guy goes through the whole 30-day process. And at the end, he's like, all right, you graduated, you're a perfect person. Now you have to go and sit in this theater for the rest of your life, basically, and stare at this blank screen. So if you want to stay perfect, you can't try anything. So it's like all the perfect people, yeah, they're all perfect, but they're not doing anything.
Yeah, because they've hit their top.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're right, the improviser looks for the mistake. It's like, that's why it's funny. And that's why.
And I think that there's I think I have a struggle with perfection. Personally, I personally have a struggle with perfection because I come from a dancer's background, and the line is everything, right? There is a perfect line, quote unquote, right? So I have that embedded in me, and now I'm living this life of making new lines. And so it's a constant challenge that I have to. Holly is my business partner at Improvolution, which I didn't even get into that how I met her. And we talk about walking our talk constantly because it's to that point of the white screen. It's ever changing, right? So we have to consistently. Nothing's ever. Not that it's not concrete, but it's constantly moving. Like I can't think of the right word. We have to shift with what happens, and to maintain the yes and life, and that's often challenging, right? Especially when you're trying to be perfect. Holly and I are this great partnership. So Holly is a groundling. Holly Mandel is her name. Holly is a groundling, and the groundlings are a school based out in LA, and people like Will Ferrell, Lisa Kudrow, Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Paul Rubens, who plays Pee Wee Herman. These guys are all groundlings. And so the type of improv it is it's character improv. So I like to call it vertical improv. So who are they? What are their wants? What do they look like? What do they sound like? And other improv that is taught in New York a lot is plot improv, which is horizontal. A happens, then B happens, then C happens. It's very storytelling. And I was taught originally plot improv, and when I met Holly, I learned vertical improv, and my whole brain exploded because I, as a musical theater performer, I'm much more emotive, and so I was completely released. I was let go, and there was an explosion in my head of creativity because of character, and I think that's one of the reasons why our corporate improv, people glob onto it so easily, is because it's not, you don't have to be in your head storytelling. Right. You can be these characters and let the voice come from them. And that's where you get the viola swollen of, I can be this confident person, and this content can come from this confident person. I can be a supportive person, and this content can come from the supportive person, as opposed to, I've got a story to tell, because then it's disconnected with your body. I know I'm jumping all over the place.
Well, I like your point, because I see a lot of times, when you watch some shows at some schools, you'll see all the improvisers on the back line that are not in the scene, like staring at the ground and thinking of stuff. And they're like, how can I jump in? They can't even watch what's going on because they're too worried about the next thing that they're going to do. So it's like by the time they've planned this out and then they jump out, it's like 2 or 3 minutes later, and that moment maybe has passed. But it's like you spent so much time thinking about this, looking at the floor, I got to do it now. So it's like one of those things where you're not in the moment because you're thinking too much.
And that's one thing I try to teach my students is the answer is always in your partner's eyes. It's not in the ether, it's not on the ground. So to stay present, it might be that scary place of constantly listening, but it's a much better place. And if you can practice that presence, you're just moving at a faster pace. And I think humanity is ready to move at that faster pace. We'll see. We'll see.
So let me ask you this. What do you think is the most common, because I think a lot of the people that are going to watch this are already actors, maybe professional actors who are thinking about doing improv or have done a little improv. What would you say is like probably the most common mistake that someone makes that's already an actor who's done a lot of scripted stuff who then goes to improv? What do you think is their biggest challenge?
That they storytell, that they're agenda driven, and that's because they're scripted, so they can plan out the beats. They know what the next scene is going to happen. In this, you have to be very at peace with not knowing.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is once you are at peace with that, it's so much more rewarding. Like the joy that you find of being present and not knowing, that's like opening a Christmas present every time you get on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember a specific scene that I was doing that oh, go ahead. That really hit home for me when we were doing like a teen movie kind of thing, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be this guy's best friend. He's at his locker getting his books out. So I come over and I put my arm around his shoulder and I'm like, hey, you going to go to the dance tonight? And I was punching him in the arm, and but just lightly like a friend would, and he's like, ow, ow. And then I realized he thought I was the bully of the school. And so he's like, oh. And so I had to completely change what I was doing right then and there and just go with it. And then, and then the scene went from there. But if I had tried to insist like, no, I'm your friend, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you got to say yes.
I mean, maybe it could have gone either way, you know what I mean? But the thing is, like, either I was going to have to accept or he was going to have to accept. But there's no way that we could have both been right necessarily, because until one person says yes and no one's right. It's like there's a tension there.
Well, I teach because I teach don't fight, because fighting's boring on stage. When you're improvising, lose. Yeah. Choose to lose, because then there's status shift, and then it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because you've said yes and. to losing, right?
Right.
You're wrong,
Yeah.
and you're right because you're wrong. Does that make sense?
Yes. That's a really good point, because we were trying to play a game in rehearsal the other day called Serious Scene. You ever play that?
Yeah.
And like the first scene that I came on and did, we were having a fight about pet turtles or something. But it was just like going back and forth, and it was just like a bunch of yes but. And it just didn't make us laugh, because we were trying to play it how you had to make each other laugh.
Oh,
and
yeah,
and it
because
was
then
going
you're
on
out
forever.
once you, yeah.
It was going on forever. I had to cut the scene. And I was like, what went wrong there? And it was about fighting. It was about no one, it's like it could have gone on forever.
Once you yes
like that.
and this, I think that's probably also one of, not so much, maybe not for actors, but for humans, like non-actors, to yes but. Because they think they're yes-anding, but they come in with an agenda. Dropping your agenda is really hard, right? And this is that's my visual of to tell a student to drop an agenda. Because you have to listen. You have to listen to everything that's said, and then you have to yes it. And then you have to and it. Yeah. I think the and is also challenging. It can be quite challenging. Because people can yes all the way. It's the adding. And all they have to do is add a little. And
right.
That's a practice. That's a practice skill, is anding.
That's the reason why I'm obsessed with this podcast called Improv for Humans with Matt Besser. And one of his regular guests is Horatio Sands, who was on Saturday Night Live, and he was an original UCB member. And he gets a lot of those guys to come on. And one of the things that I find, the reason why it's always funny to me, I mean, not always, but 90% of the time, I'm just on the train listening to that, and like, and then I'm looking around like, oh, these people aren't watching or listening to what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
And the thing why it's funny is like, if someone says like, hey, welcome to Paris, France, like everyone just like, they just think like, oh, Paris, France. Bonjour, c'est le beret. Like everyone just throws in every single thing they know about Paris, France, and like somehow they work everything into the scene, and it continues to build. Whereas like a lot of people, I think, edit themselves in their head, like, oh, well, that's just that's mundane, or that's not funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
These guys are just like, I'm just gonna be in Paris, France. What if it's true that we're in Paris? Then what could happen in Paris? And then they just go with that.
I think like the analogy that I like to say is a kid likes the box that the toy comes in sometimes better than the toy, right? And when as adults we don't see the value of the box. And I always tell my students in one-word story, so you tell a story one word at a time. And people always, that first event that's told, often they drop it because they don't think it's important enough. And they go and they find 3 other stories before they set on, okay, this one's good enough for us to improvise on. Where what you're saying is they just throw it all in and they include it all, right?
Yeah.
Which I love, right? You can have a scene about a box of hair.
Right, right. Yeah.
And it's valuable, and it's funny, and present, and youthful, and vibrant, all these things, and it's a box of hair.
It's a box of hair. Today they were doing one about, they just had all these WWF references, and like, you can't even, and they also had pizza references, and all these guys are my age, so like, they were talking about the pizza guy, and then someone came onto the scene as the Noid from the Little Caesars commercials from like the 80s and 90s.
Pizza.
Yeah. And I'm just
right?
like,
isn't that the guy?
Yeah. And like, how did they even remember that? Like, I mean, when they said it, I was like, oh my God, I remember those commercials. But it's just like, there's stuff in your brain that if you would just get out of your own way, it would just pop out of there. Because I'm sure someone thought like, pizza, what does that make me think of? Oh, the Noid. Oh no, that's weird. No one would know what that is.
Yeah.
But like the thing is, the Noid was a character, so he came on and played this character. Even if you didn't know those commercials, it was still a funny character.
Yeah. You don't have to know the history of it, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. It can be presently funny.
I have one lady in my troupe who's very funny, and she's from the Ukraine, and she's been in the States for 6 years. But she's a lot of times worried that she's not going to get the references and stuff. What would you say to her? Like, if she gets a suggestion or someone brings something in the scene that she doesn't get, what would you do?
What I love about, because I also have students who are international, and what's fun about teaching them is I say, no matter what you say, it's not a mistake. So however you interpret it, we're going to yes and you. So I can't think of an example right now, but I've had like 4 in the past 3 months where their interpretation of something that was very common in American culture was not in theirs. But I said, just interpret it however you're going to interpret it. And the scene just became something fresh and new.
Right.
So that's what I would say is you're not making a mistake by interpreting. You were making a mistake by not interpreting.
Yeah, exactly. Like freezing up just because you're worried. That's
I wouldn't. I absolutely wouldn't worry about. And that's hard to do because we have this self-critic in ourselves. And I'm sure theirs is speaking to them in their language too. So she's got a double thing of speaking English and translating what things mean.
Yeah.
If it's not common to her.
Yeah, I can identify. I was in Italy for a while, and I was scared to take an improv class over there just for that very reason. But, the thing was, like, the times that I did devise and improvise in Italian, the thing that came out of my head ended up being, they were dying laughing because A, my accent, and B, like maybe the simple way that someone would talk, because it's not their original language or not as sophisticated, it just comes out funny. Everything you say, having an accent in improv is hilarious. It's a benefit.
Always.
Now I've got a few cues. I asked you a little bit how you started. Mm-hmm. I want to just delve into that a little bit more. Like, you were a dancer, then you started taking the improv with your boyfriend at the time. Uh-huh. When did you know, because, this is like a way of life for you now. This is your business. Yeah. This is your livelihood. You also work on Saturday Night Live as a background improviser.
Yeah, well, we're not improvising.
Okay, you're just doing background.
Yeah,
okay.
we rehearse. And we do the same thing during the rehearsal that we do in the show. Okay. Which is like walk by. So if you blink, you might miss me.
Yeah. But the improv is your livelihood.
Yeah.
When did you make that switch from a dancer or a musical theater actress and say, you know what, this is my focus now? How did you know?
So, my mother always wanted me to be a dance teacher, right? And there was no way in hell that I just didn't want to do that, because if I wasn't performing, I didn't want to teach. It was sort of, it felt, I guess the only word I'm thinking of is lowly. I don't even know if that's a word. And it wasn't of any interest to me, because I think with dancing, I would have thought I was failing if I was teaching, which is horrible, I know. Because teaching is such a valued profession, and I see it now. So when I started facilitating these leadership modules, I really got interested in shifting culture. And when I met Holly and learned character improv, and we're so much on the same plane about how we want to shift culture that whenever we discuss anything, it's neither her way nor my way, it's the third way. We always discover that new way that we create together. And it's worked beautifully for us. And so I just, I feel like shifting culture is so important for us right now. One of my fantasies, I think I mentioned this to you before, Sean, is that I want to teach the Senate how to improvise. Because when I lived in Europe as a dancer, and love Europe, Denmark. I lived in London. I toured all over Europe with musicals. And I became very patriotic. I became red, white, and blue patriot. I love America. And I realized that our freedoms aren't free, right? They were fought for. And we live in the best country in the world, and we don't talk to each other. And especially in our political climate right now, there's no talking. And so I've had this fantasy for like 10 years to teach the Senate how to improvise. And bit by bit, I'm getting there, because I do believe that legislation can be passed more easily. We can create much more easily. Because you were talking about the podcast, when people just throw ideas out and they're not told that their ideas are bad, then there's many more ideas to sort of cultivate and or prune, right?
Yeah.
There you can nurture them and groom them. But if they're not there to be had, and they're not communicating, it's either my idea or your idea. There is no third idea, and so. It's one of my big fantasies. And I know I'm still probably not answering the question. How did I get here? But that's how I got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I met Holly at SNL. Kristen Wiig's head writer, and Kent Sublett, I think his name, and Holly were all part of the Groundlings. And so I was bartending. So my transition into teaching. I was bartending, and this guy says to me, "How do I know you?" And I was like, and he goes, "Oh, you're in my sketch this week." And he was Kristen Wiig's head writer.
Oh.
And so we started talking about the Groundlings, and I said I always wanted to learn that philosophy, but I'm not moving to LA. He said, "You don't have to, because Holly Mandel is here." And I met Holly that year, and this was quite a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I said, "You have to train me," the minute I met her, and she looked at me like I was crazy, and then she trained me. And we have this relationship where I'm sort of the roots and she's the branches. And I keep us rooted, and she keeps us moving. And I found that when I started teaching improv, it lit a fire in me. And it was like none other that I ever had. And I think it's the ahas that I get from my students. So my transition there was about a 3-year transition where I transitioned from bartending into just owning the school that we have. And it was tough, but it was incremental. And I finally did it. And I haven't been bartending now for 5 years. But I had bartended for 25.
Oh, my goodness.
That also teaches you good improv.
Sure. Absolutely, yeah. I'm working in a restaurant on the Upper East Side, and I just started my own improv group in February, and no, I can identify with that. It's like I feel so much happier actually at my day job now that I have this, because it feels like this is what I'm meant to do, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, because I've been thinking, like, I've been an actor, and then I was doing some screenwriting, and like a movie that I did got made, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm a screenwriter producer now. So then I started doing all this writing stuff, and then I was like, this is boring. I'm by myself all the time with the writing, you know? And I was like, what if I could write with other actors? And then I was like, yeah, but I don't know. At that time, improv comedy had a bad taste in my mouth, because I auditioned for an improv troupe in my college, and they were like very talented, but they didn't accept me in the group. But they didn't like teach us how to improv in the audition. I had never done it before, so I didn't know yes and. I didn't even know what that was. So I was just trying to do whatever. I mean, I don't know how bad my audition was, but it was like, how would I know how to improv already? What, you know, I thought they would teach you, but they didn't. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'm not good at improv, or I don't know. And so I never really considered it, and I thought the people were stuck up. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, improv people are stuck up. I don't want to get into that. So then I got into physical theater, because I was like devising with other actors. And it doesn't have to be funny. But I just started, so I went and I got this physical theater MFA in Italy, and I got to work with a lot of Italian people and devise theater and all this stuff, and that was when I realized, like, oh, this is improv. Like, you know, it might be, because I mean, almost, you know, like 90% of the sketches we ended up making were funny. You know what I mean? And we made them through improvising. We never had a piece of paper out. You know what I mean? It was all just physical in the room and using characters and building. And I was like, I'm good at this, you know? And I just like renewed that confidence. And I was like, when I get back to the States, I was in Italy for 4 years. I said, I'm going to go to improv school. I don't know where I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do that. And so I just got into it, and I was like, I felt validated when I did it, and I was like, okay, all right, I can do this. And that was when I just, you know, started this company and like realized, like, not only do I do improv.
Did you go in LA to school or here?
I went improv school here.
Okay.
At UCB.
Okay.
Yeah. And just when I got back, I mean, this last year. So that's when I realized, like, well, I think based on what I did in Italy, plus these classes I've taken here, I kind of have an idea of what I want to explore in this. And because I'd always been into movies, I was like, in UCB manual, they have this movie format that Del Close invented, and it was like, this is awesome. Like, not only do you do a movie, but it's like anything, because I wrote my thesis on genre.
Okay.
So I'm really into genre, and it was like anything that departs from what would be in the genre, that's your game. Those are the characters that you play off of in every scene. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this sounds really fun. So I was just like, I'm gonna start a group and do this. And anyway, so I got into that. So I definitely identify with, like, finally I feel like it's all coming together, like all the things that I've done my whole life as an actor and all this, like, oh, it's improv. That's what I really love. Yes. Yeah. So, wow, that's great. So I guess that's why we kind of connect. It's like you've gone through all these different iterations and then been like, bam, okay, I'm having an epiphany every day when I go to work.
Yeah.
I mean,
And this is at the point where it's like, oh, do I stand in front of the blank screen? No. What's next?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the next perfection?
Right.
We live a life of perfections.
What is the next?
It's a secret.
Oh.
We're launching some stuff very soon. It's sort of two-pronged. One is into corporate and one is into our school, which it's more along the lines of what we're doing anyway. It's either we come to you, which is usually corporate, or you come to us, which is our school. It's just more detailed.
I don't know if you know about this group in Boston, but I was just in Boston last weekend, and I wanted to see about maybe seeing a show one night when I was there, and there's this place called, and you should check out their site, it's called Improv Asylum.
Yeah.
They have their own space, you know them.
Yeah.
And they have a company called IA Innovations, and I'm telling you, they had like 20 different classes for corporate, and all the way down to like management coaching and like creativity sessions, like 20 different types of improv coaching that they do. I'm like, how long have they been doing this? How do they develop all this material? I want to take all these classes.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I emailed them. I was like, hey, I want to like get trained as a teacher in what you do. It sounds awesome. You know, so like, I'm really curious.
Are you moving to Boston?
No, I don't think I'm moving, but I would like to just like do a week with them or something.
Yeah,
you know,
that'd be cool.
Because it sounds like they're just really entrenched in that.
And I think it's so valuable to implement these tenets into our lives. And I always tell my students, the more you yes and your life, the more opportunity is afforded you. That's just it. Like, it's that simple. The more you can honestly yes and your life, like, say yes to opportunity, more is gonna show up.
You know what would be
It's
cool?
like a 5G as opposed to a 2G.
Oh, bandwidth?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm into a lot of self-help stuff, and I always watch. I've like done Tony Robbins stuff, like the one that you buy this.
I had all of his CDs and I didn't use them. It wasn't my time yet.
I listened to the entire program, and that was actually how I made my first movie, the feature one, because I followed all the steps, and like the main key that you get out of those things is like if you can find something that motivates you enough to do a project, you'll follow through on it.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it like Marie Forleo has this great coaching.
Oh, I love her. Yeah.
The B School.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing. I think like if you have help with how to plan it, then it gets done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking about how they sell these webinars, or like stuff that you can just download and then do it at your own pace. I mean, I don't think that really exists for improv. I mean,
it doesn't, and we've talked about it at length, and it's the difference between like seeing an improv show on screen or seeing it in person.
Yeah.
And that experience is and I'm not saying that it's not valuable on screen. It's so much more valuable when you're in person. It's the same thing when you teach it, I think, or are being taught it.
Because it's collaborative.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you can't collaborate via Skype or anything like that. Possibly. I don't know about a web series. We have spoken about it. I have my my scissors out too soon, probably. I don't know yet.
Well, I was just, when you said that, I thought about like, oh, well, I've heard, and I've never really actually seen one of these, but I hear that there are improv monologists, like people who go and get a suggestion from the audience and they do a monologue or a storytelling based off that. Do you ever do that with your students, where they're up alone to do anything, or do you do any shows like that?
We have some of our students who do that. We don't teach it yet.
No.
Yeah.
What do you think
we do two-prov, but we don't do monoprov yet.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, what's the difference? I mean, do you think in
confidence?
Confidence.
I think confidence that you can do a 15-minute set on your own, with absolutely nothing but like maybe a chair.
Yeah. No, that sounds like the K2, the Everest of improv.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, doing clown and having to devise a clown solo, my teacher would tell me, he's like, look, this is the hardest acting thing you're ever going to do, is come up with a solo clown show. He's like, if you were in two people, it would be 500 times easier, But like, this is the hardest thing you're ever going to do. And I know
that Groundlings does teach it.
Oh, they do a solo?
Yeah.
I would like to take that, because I mean, that to me, that's intense. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm afraid of that one, which is why I probably should do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get back to our list here, see if there's anything that... Okay, we talked a little bit about bringing improv into schools. Okay, this is something, since you have an experience on Saturday Night Live, working with a lot of people that have become famous being improvisers, and I had read that book about Saturday Night Live, how competitive the environment is there. Do you think it's something that changes in improviser? Can you, I don't know, the pressure of being a famous improviser, does that change things at all? I mean, what do you notice there? What's the environment like at Saturday Night Live? Because I mean, Saturday Night Live seems to go through stages where it's just like you watch and you go, this seems really stale, really old sometimes, and then suddenly there's a fresh cast member, there's a couple fresh writers, or something changes and it's like, oh, Saturday Night Live's funny again. Like, have you noticed that going through those years working there?
Oh, sure. I've been on SNL for 13 years now, and you definitely see a flow. And like last year, just because politically,
oh yeah,
it was
Alec Baldwin.
Hilarious. And Melissa playing Sean Spicer, and so you didn't really even have to write anything, And it's the same thing like when Tina was playing Sarah Palin. There wasn't a whole lot of writing going on. It was just like, okay, copying down what the person said, and yes, their comic timing is everything. Seth Meyers said it the other day who was he talking to? Oh, Candice Bergen. Was it Candice Bergen? I can't remember. But he was talking about the one thing that you never get used to. It might have been Kate. Is the live portion, like that it's live, right?
Oh.
That's the one thing that you never know what's going to happen with a live audience. You can plan as much as you possibly can, but you just don't know. And I think sometimes if the writers take a slide down, then they're just gonna be going that until they go back up, right? And have not friendlier audiences, but more cohesive audiences, and it's millions of people around too, that they're on the same plane with, and then the energy gets multiplied.
Yeah.
I am completely making this up because I'm not sure, but it sounds like, okay, that could be, or I don't know. I mean, I've seen it, and you're like, oh, come on, Lauren. With some of them, I do think sometimes it's myopic a little bit on the writers and Lauren's part, where I mean, Lauren is a very funny person and knows comedy. And pretty much, I won't say he's in a class on his own, but he knows what's funny. And so sometimes the reliance on that is not fresh, right? And he needs to go like, Lauren, wake up, let's move, let's shift. To the point of what I was saying before, is you have to walk your talk. You have to maybe be open to a fresh new idea, and because the what did they say, it's to do with our political climate, but the fish rots from the head. With that too, the fish swims from the head too. So wherever he's guiding, that's where the writers are going. So it's up to him all the time. So sometimes it becomes stale, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's really well done.
Yeah.
And it's 43 years old, so.
Oh, that's amazing. So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously sketch and improv are two different things. But through the last, 40, 50 years of network television, there's been one improv show that's been around a long time. It's all short form improv. But there's actually never been a long form improv TV show that's ever made any sort of real splash. Can you speak to the difference between improv and sketch as they work on television? Do you think there's a reason why?
I have a show stuck in my head. Isn't there a British show that does more long form? What's
the show?
It's the line that you have to, the improviser has to come in. They're put into a costume. They have no idea what the set is going to be.
Okay.
And there's other actors around them that know exactly what's happened, and they have to walk into it, and it's something like, I thought you said that. It's nothing like that, but I can't remember the name of it. It's really funny, but it's more long form. It's more storytelling.
So there's a current show on now.
It's not, I don't know that it's on now, but it was on for quite a long time.
Wow. I don't know the show.
They did do one here that was of that, and I can't think of the black improvising.
Wayne Brady?
No. He was on, not Fridays.
Dave Chappelle?
No.
Ice Cube? No. Ice-T?
No, he's a comedian.
Oh, Tyler Perry?
No.
Oh, Kevin Hart?
No. Taller, lighter skinned, balding now. Really funny, always has a goatee, or did have a goatee for a long time. Well, he was the host of this show in America.
Okay.
And they did it, but it wasn't nearly as successful as it was in London.
Interesting.
Or was it? It might have been even Australian.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's more long form. It's more like we're telling a story. It was like they would do two of them during a half-hour setting. and the improviser would have to like improvise through it.
Would they have to? Was it like? Oh, did you lose your coffee? Do we need to cut?
No, I'm good. Sorry.
Wait, was it so? Did the improviser have to figure out what was going on? It was
They
like
kind of knew right away from the costume, but they would have to improvise through the problem that was given them.
to see that.
I binged it like 2 years ago, and I cannot remember the name of it right now. And I've completely obliterated your question again.
Well, that's my question. It's like, why is it that anything that's, I mean, Whose Line Is It Anyway is a great show. One of my favorite shows.
They also tape 4 hours for a half an hour.
Oh, really? They cut a lot of stuff that they put?
That's why I'm saying it's so hard to film live improv and make it funny. But I'm sure the whole 4 hours was probably hilarious when you were in the audience. But to have that disconnect and it be on a screen, they have to really edit it.
Wow, I had no idea that they're taking that many takes in. But I mean, think about those songs, those improvised songs. I mean,
Wayne Brady.
Oh, he is
so phenomenal.
In another class.
Yeah,
isn't he?
yeah.
Like, I mean,
he also does what it's Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
So he's really he's a pro at that.
Yeah.
And making it seem, I mean, he's a genius musical improviser, and he uses that because you, as an improviser, you see, he's really, really good at that.
I just wonder if improv, whether it's short form or long form, I mean, but I'm more interested in long form in the sense that, not necessarily that it has to be long, but in the sense that...
Ooh, life form. I just thought of that.
Yeah, like it's...
Short form, long form, life form.
Yeah.
Now that's a program.
Yeah, because, I mean, what we're talking about is like the best show, that, like, do you know the ASCAT show that they do?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like someone just comes in and tells a story about their life, and then they pluck premises out of that and do scenes. Like, that's long form, but they could be 30 seconds long, the scenes. It's not long form. It's not about telling a story necessarily. So, like, ASCAT, I think, to me, the ones that they have taped are hilarious, but I wonder, did they have to tape 10 episodes and they only showed those 2?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, I just don't think that long form improv has really gotten its due in television, and I just wonder if there's a chance for it somehow. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, you look at Larry David, though, and that's all improvised.
Yeah, but I mean, he's laying out sketches, though. I mean...
I'll say yes, and I don't know, but from my knowledge, they get like, he did this to you, and this is how you react, and everything else is improvised.
Okay, so they get the premise,
right,
and then they improvise.
And then they have to improvise around it.
And well, like Christopher Guest movies, I guess would be a close thing to that. You know, like it's a mockumentary.
And that's all improvised.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess now that I think about it more, that you've pointed this out, that there are some things out there, and I mean, any like a Will Ferrell movie, I would assume that a decent amount of that is just Will Ferrell getting to go off.
And if like Will Ferrell is such a, I think he's a genius. What I love about him is I heard this story about him that he wanted to do Shakespeare. And all of his friends just kept laughing at him because there's some people, like he can scream at somebody in a film and you're just going to laugh at him because he's hilarious, right? If I were to scream at somebody on film, you'd be like, oh, bitch is going to kill somebody, right? There's not that funny that's just like, that surrounds him, that he was just, that was a gift. Right? And so I think when you let that creativity go, you just don't know what's going to come out. And, I think Melissa McCarthy has the same thing where they're told, just go riff. Let's see what happens. Yeah, and it's brilliant.
So, do you think an improv actor can, like Will Ferrell, could do something serious if he did Shakespeare? Like
I
if he was
thought
to play
about
a Syrian,
that,
like
and
Iago or something?
I think with it would have to be a lot of editing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like he plays the villain in those Zoolander movies where they're the models.
Yes, and he's hilarious. But you have to look at like any kind of Marvel or DC comic villain. They're funny.
Yeah.
There's a dark comedy about them. I mean, there's nothing dark about him.
I mean, even in like Die Hard or something, you know, like Alan Rickman's character is actually quite funny.
Yeah.
A charming and funny character.
Oh, Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
Love
He's
him.
one of the greatest.
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed with cancer last year, and the minute I was diagnosed with it, I thought about the commercial Claritin, where my life was already good. I just felt like there was a scrim over it, that it was going to be cleared away. Like all of the waste was going to sort of be scrimmed away, and everything was going to be clearer. And so I live on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, right?
Yeah.
And I was walking to my first oncologist appointment, and I was walking there, and I was like, you know, because you don't know what's expected. You absolutely don't know what's expected. And I forgot where I lived. I forgot the street name. And I started freaking out. And I was like, and I felt my shoulders come up, and I felt like I felt my knees like lock, and I'm walking, and I was like, what's the name of my street? What's the name of my street? And I was like, stop. And I always tell my students, take a breath, soften your knees. It's like, okay, I know Frederick Douglass, I know Malcolm X. Okay, take another breath. Soften your knees. Where do you live? 7th Avenue. Yep. Just breathe. Everything's going to be fine. Unknown is good. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. And then I walked to my oncologist appointment. And I was like, this shit works. So that's an anecdote of how improv can really affect you in a crisis situation. Says you are in the exact right place at the exact right time every moment of your life. And if you take that perspective, then there's peace. There's inner peace. It's like, oh, I'm working from right now. I'm not working from 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes ahead. All I have is the present, right? Which is the present. But if people who really embrace that idea, I think are just happier, right? And then it's more maneuverable because you've got your steering wheel. You know, you're not out here and you're not in here. You have your steering wheel. I like Leona. And I think about, because people say through this journey that I've been through in the past year, they say I couldn't do it. Not me. That I couldn't do it like you've done it. You're inspiring, which I love. I love to be an inspiration. But I think everyone can. I do see an inner light. And I'm always curious, and you could call me a culturalist or racist, I don't know. But I come from a Jewish mother, and Jewish women tend to find problems where there are none, right? Because they want to be the solution to them. So long as there's a problem, they're valued. And I live in a place that's on the exact opposite, where it's not a problem. Like, there's never a problem, right? So that's where our mother-daughter relationship finds a lot of friction, because she's always has a problem and I don't ever have a problem. So it's meeting in the middle. That's always a challenge. But my life's a lot easier than hers.
Why is that?
Because I don't have. I mean, when I got cancer, my mother's always been afraid of her getting cancer. I'm so glad I'm the one that got it instead of her. First of all, it would have killed her because she would have just spiraled down. I never thought of myself as sick. I just was like, okay, I have to get through this journey. Let's have fun with it, because otherwise I'm going to shoot myself in the head. I would never do that. But with my mother, it would have been one problem after the other, and it would have anchored her. Mine, I was never anchored. I just my feet were so. I think my feet have just landed within the past month, where I was just head first. Let's go. I took my team. I made my team up of 150 people. I was like, let's go. We're gonna do this together. And now I'm writing a book. I just hired a coach.
Oh, wow. And this is about your journey with
through cancer and improv.
Cancer and improv. Oh my God, that sounds great.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And scared, because I'm like, I can't write. I don't even like to read. And somebody gifted me, one of my students gifted me the Gilda Radner book, It's Always Something. And hilarious icon, and one of my favorites. And I'm reading her book, and it's very conversational, which is how I write. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can totally do this. And be funny, I think. So I'm inspired too.
It was. You talked a little bit about the Senate, maybe teaching it there. But can improv really diffuse a conflict? Or, I mean, I can see how it might prevent one if someone already had the knowledge. But if there's a conflict already in progress, how are you going to go in there?
I don't know. I have to show up first. I feel like in is it a conflictual? Is that a word?
Conflictual, yeah.
Situation, in a conflict situation, it might be at its most vital. The thing is there's soft skills, right? The improv skills are soft skills. Usually when you're dealing with anything corporate and or out of the quote-unquote creative realm. And that's what a lot of students come in for, to improve their soft skills of communicating, of team building, and once people understand that there's not a need for resistance, they let go of the resistance. So it's literally just getting the foot of the improvising teacher in the door. If they realize that there's any possibility that it will help the conflict, then I think that's the hardest part. Once you're in there, it's the idea of, okay, your idea is not working, my idea is not working, let's make up a new idea together. How do we do that? You do that through the tenets of improv. You do that through the practice skills of improvisation, which they don't know, because they know the no. They K-N-O-W the N-O.
What about, okay, I'm thinking of a hypothetical situation where you know the tenets of improv, but the other party doesn't. Can it still be beneficial?
Yeah, you yes and them. Yes, I like this about your idea, and this is how I think we might be able to improve it. I always lead in, and you can say it's manipulative or whatever, and I'm always authentic. You lead in with the approval. You lead in with what's good.
Okay.
Because you don't lead in with, I don't like this about this. Well, that was my idea, right? That's what you're gonna, there's gotta be something that you like about it.
Is it, I guess I'm just thinking about people worried, okay, it sounds good, but if I go into a negotiation and I yes and, I'm going to give away the farm. You know what I mean? I think would be the fear. How do you stay strong but yes and in a negotiation type of situation?
if you are truthful about what you think is good, then you're heading in that direction anyway, right? You're
truthful about what you think is good about what they said.
You're very agile with your listening about hearing what the positives are for both and how a compromise can be met. Oh, I know it can work. I absolutely know it can work. And I know it's going to take a really strong improviser to be in the center of it to help mediate it. Whatever it is, be it legislation for women's rights, legislation for children's rights, for DACA, for all of this. Politically, I'm not opposed to Trump winning now because it woke us the hell up. Like, we were all asleep. There was a sign, and Holly, maybe it's not Holly, I can't remember. Somebody was mad about this sign, and I was like, oh, that's true. At the Women's March, it said, if Hillary won, I'd be having brunch.
It's true, though.
And it's very true.
Yeah. Now, if you could go back in time to, let's say, 1937, and Hitler is being an aggressor or whatever, or any time during that World War II era, could you really convince people to yes and Hitler? I mean, could you yes and Hitler and change the course of events there, do you think?
I don't know. I'm just starting to read this, and his name is Bob Hoke. It's called Spiral Dynamics,
okay.
And it's about different tiers of culture, right? And I truly don't know jack about this yet because I literally just got the audiobook. Holly and I were talking about this, though, where there's Marie Forleo talks about this too, like the blue and the red.
Okay.
The Red Sea, where it's too many people are in there competing, so you want to find something that's different about your product.
Blue ocean strategy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why Obama, what became unpopular, was I think I'm believing this, is that he was too blue ocean. So say you have this red culture. I think it's orange in Spiral Dynamics, but it's you think of Colombian drug cartel, right?
Okay.
And you think of impoverished Congo, where it's like if you it's fight or fight, right? It's like you live a day, right? And you're constantly on edge, and it's life or death. Where if you throw money at that, it's kind of like if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he's got food for a lifetime. So if you throw money at impoverished communities, they're just going to eat it up, and they're not going to thank you. They're not going to learn how to become that green level, right? But it's that step that you have to take to become the green level, right? You have to be in that space before you learn how to be in that next space. And so you look at like the elites up here who we have ease. We have ease in our lives. And I'm not saying that my life's easy, but look at me right now. I'm having an interview in Central Park in New York City, the metropolis of the world, and I'm not being scared that I might be shot at.
Yeah, and you know where you're going to get water and food
yeah,
from
exactly. So that's what I mean by ease. And so until that culture softens and learns how to have those other soft skills to where they can operate in that level. And that doesn't mean that operating in that level, I don't have some of those attributes, because I absolutely do. But those are the ones that are probably the no's, right? Those are the critics. Those are the things that everything's bad, right? I've just learned how to shut it off through yes and.
Okay.
which I've catapulted myself into a whole other realm to where it's not a problem. Let's work with it, right? I see it, like Sarah Silverman did a great job with it, with the troll that called her a cunt or something like that, and she said, I think that you're in pain. And the guy was. He had back problems, and he was homebound, and he was just attacking. So she hooked up with him, got him chiropractors, got him people to look at him, and now he's better. Because she didn't say, you're a troll, I hate you. She listened.
Wow. I didn't hear about that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and
She yes-anded him.
She totally yes-anded him. So, yeah, I'll say that to your question about, like, if you're in a conflict situation. Yeah, you can absolutely. I see this about you.
Right. Because I almost think, like, with the Trump situation, like, the guy thrives on getting attention. Obviously, he never felt that he was good enough, so he turned his, to try to get attention from the outside, whether it's just like the bully in school. If I don't get attention at home for being good, I'll get attention for being bad. It's a classic psychological thing.
Yeah.
So Trump thrives on that. So basically, like, all these people with this eruption of, like, F you, Trump, and not my president, and all this stuff, and, like, always talking negative about him, it's feeding his ego. Whereas if someone says something very hurtful, like the things that he said, especially like about immigrants and stuff like that, and like trying to feed his dynamic, like instead of responding in that knee-jerk reaction way, which is it just entrenches their position, if you yes and that, and the same thing with a Hitler or something, at least in my opinion, you're just like, yes, so I hear you're angry that there's no job.
I would have said, oh, I like this about your art. Because he wanted to go to art school.
Right, sure. Yeah, what if you just were like, checked out one of his his paintings?
He would have never become the horrible person that he became.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you dehumanize, the thing is...
I don't know. I think some people are just evil.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But like, when Hitler used dehumanization to pave the way to do what he did. So he made it seem like these certain types of people were less than human, deserved to die. Well, when you react in the same way and you try to dehumanize a Trump or dehumanize a Hitler so that they can be killed, like, you're actually doing the exact same. You're not any better than they are. So you might think, well, we need to do this to triumph over evil. But it's like, do you need to become evil to, it's like the same thing with cops.
And the thing with Hitler, it's so interesting, is he was against people that looked exactly like him.
Yeah, he wasn't even blue-eyed or whatever.
No, and so that's the self-loathing that he had.
Yeah.
That you can look at now, it's like, everyone has beauty. You just have to, about that, I don't know. Because I've been to Auschwitz and Dachau, and it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And so, could you have shifted that? Hope so, but... And then you're like, okay, history of the world, did we need that contrast so that we'll never go there again? The Dalai Lama, I always like to say this, the Dalai Lama, and I think the 96 or the 98 Peace Summit said the world will be saved by the Western woman. And the reason why he said this, I think, is because of our affluence. Because we have time. Literally, like, we have time to talk about it. So we have time to do things about it, right? So because we're not carrying water uphill both ways with a baby in both arms, right? Waiting to be shot or raped. We have affluence to shift the world, and we're women. Because we're not as interested in wars. And that sort of power play.
Well, that's a good question. How do you see the next, let's say, 50 years playing out with yes and changing the world? I mean,
I'll do my part to help people listen. And we'll see. Maybe that's the name of my book. We'll see.
We'll see. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be happy to be here and work it out. I figure I'll be here for another 50 years.
I think so.
Yeah. There's a guy, I think he's 120 this year, in America, like not China, because they just live better. They don't have our shit, meaning pollution and genetically modified crap. Where do you see us going in 50 years with improv?
Well, I know that they're teaching it in a lot of after-school programs now as a class for the kids, and I mean, I would like to think that it just becomes ubiquitous in the language, the culture, just the phrase "yes and."
Yeah, like everybody knows it.
Yeah, like everybody knows if you have a problem, just yes and it. You know, like that would be common knowledge, like the earth is round, you know, like at a certain point. And I think that's a very real possibility. I mean, because just like you think of any slogan of any company, like the only reason why Coca-Cola is popular is because they spend $4 billion a year connecting coolness with Coca-Cola, friendship, enjoyment with Coca-Cola, the values that you cherish with Coca-Cola, you know?
It's
so
true.
Why don't we do the same thing for improv, you know, or the same thing just for, I mean, meditation would be a good thing to do, like inner peace, inner self-work is kind of a thing that, like, I think, you know, again, you know, there's a lot of yoga going on, but it's like it gets kind of appropriated by the fitness, you know, the body fitness community.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and like yoga's about like working your abs or something, but you know, it's really not. And like improv, and I mean, part of the reason for this series or movie or all the things that we're doing here with the video is like, okay, improv, it's like, oh yeah, I do improv, so then maybe I can be on SNL one day, you know, so then maybe I can be a movie star.
Yeah.
But it's like, is there a more profound reason to do improv than that? And I think there is.
Much. Yeah, it goes a lot deeper. Again, the soft skills are so important, but they're not outwardly money making.
Right.
So I think that's where the connection isn't yet. Though they can be.
So with all of our interview subjects on Inner Improv, we improvise a scene at the end of the interview using the random word generator. So I'm just going to pull up a random word here, which is going to come out of my email inbox of some spam message that I get. And the word today is swimsuit. Swimsuit. So we'll do a story about that, whoever thinks of something swimsuit.
So I was 13, and it was my first time that I'd ever gone water skiing. And so I'm from Cincinnati, so we were on the Ohio River, and Tina McQueen her mom took me on their speedboat, and her cousin I had a big crush on. I think his name was Chris. So I think I was wearing a two-piece, but I'm 13, so it doesn't really matter. So anyway, I get up on the skis, and I've never skied before, so I was a bad skier. And well, I shouldn't say bad. I was a novice. You're not supposed to get out in front of your skis, right? So I got out in front of them, right? And once you're supposed to let go, right? Because you're in front of your skis. I pulled back because I didn't want to let go. I thought, oh, I'm a pro, right? And then I let go. The rope twisted around my leg and pulled me under to where they thought they hit a log, and I was pulled. And if you ever saw Jaws as a youngster, that's how it felt when she's being pulled underneath the water. And so once she thought she hit a log, but then she realized, oh, it's Rebecca, Becky at the time. It unraveled, and I popped my foot up because I thought I had lost it. I thought it got pulled off, and I had all 5 toes, and I wiggled them, and nothing happened except for me being bruised. 13 years old. There's a lot of rubberness in there.
All right. So, hey Becky, I saw how rubbery your foot is.
Yeah.
I was like really, I don't know, kind of impressed by that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I feel like sometimes I'm all rubber, and so I have a lot of fun swimming in my bathtub.
Oh, like a rubber ducky kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool,
I even
cool.
quack.
Wow.
Yeah, like it, quack. Because I spend a lot of time alone. I'm an only child.
Yeah, your mom was showing me some photos of you in the bathtub when you were younger, and
Yeah.
she'd paint you all yellow,
Yeah.
put an orange hat on you.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Yeah. My mom tells me that you fix our shed a lot.
Yeah, I'm pretty
We
handy.
break it. We break our shed a lot.
Yeah, because I heard you keep hitting logs in your shed. And
Yeah.
then,
I practice. I
Yeah.
practice on hitting the logs.
Oh, so that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm in the 4-H club, and and so we have a log hitting, like we hit it, like it's a karate chop, with an axe.
But when your hand bounces off of there,
Yeah.
that's why you haven't been able to actually break it.
Yeah.
And then your hand bounces off and hits the shed.
And
it breaks
sometimes
the door.
it hits me, and it's like boom, 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 boom. Yeah, because it just bounces off.
Wow, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I really like about you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you're just like Teflon. Like
Yeah.
anything just
like
bounces.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Ronald Reagan, exactly. Because like, whenever
Teflon Ron.
Yeah, trickle down economics didn't work. Hey, he still got reelected. You know what I mean? Like,
did.
you keep breaking the shed, and you
I
still
even
keep.
think he would have gotten 3 times.
Oh yeah,
Like Bloomberg.
sure,
Yeah.
exactly. Bloomberg.
Bloomberg's rubbery.
Yeah.
It's rubbery. It works better with short people. Rubberyness.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Because they bounce higher.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
because those Super Balls.
Yeah.
Those were
Boom. Yeah.
So anyway, I was thinking like maybe I could take you to the dance. It's
Josh.
yeah.
Wow.
It's a hip hop dance
Yeah?
school.
Yeah. Well, when I twirl, like it's really something to see.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
I heard you just bouncing off the walls out
What
there.
should we wear?
I was probably thinking to put you in one of those little plastic cups that because you put the quarter in and then you come out of the machine.
Yeah. So like a presentation. You would present me.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
sometimes kids play with the box more than they play
We
with
could
the.
both fit.
We should. Well, yeah, I'll pack myself and there's tools and everything.
Yeah, right?
We'll just be inside of a plastic bubble.
Those hooks that like you do from the outside.
Yeah, and we'll just roll into the party.
Oh my god.
We can have someone push us in, or actually, someone could pull us in on a rope. Just don't pull back.
No, you know what happens when you pull back.
Never pull back. Always pull forward.
And